kids in a crowd on the computer.
I know, it's really quiet.
Hey, is it against the law to start a meeting early?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yes.
actually is.
Actually.
It actually is. Yes.
Alicia, do we have a quorum, please?
Councilmember Fennel is present. Councilmember Contreras is present. Councilmember Runenbaum is present. Councilmember Young is present. Councilmember McCon is present, and Mayor Moss is present.
Thank you. If we could all stand, please. We're honored tonight for our invocation and pledge to have Dallas Cowboy and Hall of Fame football great and Willow Park citizen, Mr. Rayfield Wright. He's going to give the invocation and the pledge. Mr. Wright, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm honored to be here. Let's bow our head, please. Heavenly Father, we humbly come before you this evening, Father, to give you thanks and praise for all things. Thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. Those blessings we are yet to receive. Ask your blessings to be upon this special meeting, Father, this evening. And I pray, Father, in Jesus' name, that you bless us with every discussion, every opportunity that comes before our way. And we just thank you and praise your holy name. In Jesus' name, I pray.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
There are no public comments. We'll get into the consent agenda. We'd like to approve the city council minutes of May 14th, May 21st, and June 4th of 2019. Do we have a motion?
Do we have the minutes from May 14th?
I emailed them this
Okay.
morning. We can wait if y'all want to. We don't have to approve them tonight. We want to do the other two and then look
Look
over
at
them.
them. I didn't get a chance to look at them.
I apologize.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Regular,
Please, when they table, so.
we'll table it.
Do we want to approve the two that we reviewed that were in the packet? Or is it easier just to table the whole?
Let's just table the whole thing.
I move that we table the approval of minutes.
Okay? We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Regular agenda items, presentation by Chief Mike Lenore and Engineer Jared Junker on the hazard mitigation plan. Chief, you're up.
Thank you, sir. All right. Promise this won't be a long presentation.
Not about the weather.
And not about the weather.
It's not as much fun.
Okay. All right, so Jared and I are going to just give you our, this is our required meeting that we have to have for the COG. And this is our public hearing, answer questions, cares and concerns. The hazard mitigation plan is a plan, stakeholder-driven, documented that a state, tribal, local government uses to describe the risk and vulnerabilities, as well as the long-term strategies and implementation approach of reducing loss of life and property from natural disasters. Here's how it works. We determine the natural hazard. We determine how the hazard will affect our jurisdiction. We start making the plan and have 2 ways to mitigate the hazards, and assess and reassess as needed. There we go. Things we consider, the natural hazards profile, the capability assessments, our building codes, fire codes, staffing levels, the community profile, and the National Flood Insurance Program compliance. What hazards affect Willow Park? So we've got it broken down from 1 to 9, and so I apologize, they're not in numeric order. Number 1 is going to be our tornadoes. Number 2 is going to be thunderstorms, including hail, lightning, and wind. We kind of lucked out this weekend, didn't get the big wind that everybody else east of us got. 3 is flooding. 4 is going to be wildfires. 5 is winter storms. 6, extreme heat. 7 is drought. 8, expansive soils. And then 9 is going to be earthquakes. Haven't really seen a big one yet on that, but we do have them. They're small. What can it do for the city? Allows us to receive grant funding through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. Program provides resources to assist state, tribal, governmental, territories, local communities in their efforts to implement and sustain pre-disaster natural hazard mitigation programs. I tried to get this set up for the storm sirens. That's what started the entire program. We didn't have the hazard mitigation plan in place, so I wasn't able to get funding for that. So that kind of got the fire department ball rolling on, we needed to get this plan going. Benefits of it: support risk reduction activities, improve resiliency, eliminate the impact of future events, provide long-term solutions to the problems. And that's just kind of an example. Elevate the home reduction risk of flood damage from future floods. You can buy sandbags, pumps, other things to kind of help protect the homes, businesses. Offers cost-effective solutions to be funded. Projects potentially save much more than the cost of implementing the project. Helps avoid repetitive damages from disasters. There's a cost share requirement. FEMA provides the 75% of the funding. The remaining is 25%. Comes from a variety of sources. We have Jared's been working real hard on taking care of this, and this luckily has not cost us anything other than sweat hours. Types of available grants that we can do: hazard mitigation grant programs, pre-disaster mitigation grant programs, flood mitigation grant programs, earthquake, FEMA, risk map, and building science branch. It's almost endless. Our current status, we kicked this off on November 18th, and it's continued all the way up to our mitigation workshop here in June for our combined public meeting. And then we're going to review and adopt the plan as soon as we can. Once we get it received, we'll be presenting it back to you and getting it approved. Current cost is we've been divided into 13 participants from other jurisdictions. The cost was $37.50 per jurisdiction. Willow Park's put in $46.63 and 43 cents in in-kind match. So that's a lot of sweat.
That 4663, so sweat equity?
That's sweat equity.
All right.
Here's a small snapshot of information about the plan and the programs. It's merely a chance for us to present to the council the information that will be forthcoming, and we'll need to vote on it at a later time. Questions?
So Chief, can we request any of that grant money for radios or, dealing with communications or communication issues?
Yes. So there are specific grants where we can request certain types of radio communication equipment. We would probably have to do that in conjunction with the county since they have the radio system.
Right.
But definitely options we can explore, absolutely.
Because I know that's always a problem.
It's always a problem.
Any other questions for Mike?
We need to open the public hearing.
We're going to.
Okay.
No other questions? We'll open the public hearing at 7:09 PM. Are there any comments or questions? If not, we're closing it at 7:10 PM. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Item number 2, discuss and take action to consider and act on a final plat of a replat of Lot 6R, 7R, 8R1, 8R2, 9R1, 10R, 11R1, 11R2, 13, Block B, Crown Point Addition being 22.75 acres. Wesley Franklin Survey, abstract number 468, and Isaac Headley Survey, abstract number 619, City of Willow Park, Parker County, Texas, located on Shops Boulevard. Betty.
Okay. This final plat is actually what I term kind of a cleanup or plat. It's helping us adjust the lot lines for some of the developments that we've already approved. That one's a little better, and I think you have it in your packet. Basically, this replat adjusts the lot lines for the Mariposas, which is the lot that is shown in green. It also does the adjustments for Lot 8R1, which is the green lot at the bottom, and then the one just to the north of it, 8R2. Those are the two medical and office buildings that we approved the site plans on. This replat also allows and provides for the area that is shown in pink, which is all of the parkland and open space area, as well as the little circular turnaround. So that's been incorporated with this replat into one single lot. Probably the highlight is Checkout Lane, which is going to be in front of the Spring Hill Suites and all, is being renamed to Bridge Street, which is what it is in the subdivision where the bridge comes across off of Meadows Place Drive. So that will eliminate any confusion for public safety or the general public. It'll just be private through this, on this side. It will be a public street on the other, but it will still carry the same name. This plat does meet the requirements of our subdivision ordinance for a replat and final plat, and the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff have reviewed the replat, and we would recommend approval as presented. If y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and Mr. Stark, the engineer, is here also.
Any questions for Betty? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the final plat as read by Mayor Moss.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 3, to consider and act on a preliminary plat of Block EFG, Crown Point Addition, Phase 4, being a 19.80 acre tract of land, Wesley Franklin Survey, abstract number 468, and McKinney and Williams Survey, abstract number 954, City of Willow Park, Parker County, Texas, located in 4200 block of I-20 Service Road North. Miss Betty.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a preliminary plat for a proposed 19.8 acre subdivision. The owner proposes to plat the property into 3 lots, or actually 3 larger blocks. Most likely, they will be re-subdivided at a future time as prospective purchasers of the lots come in. The property is presently zoned local retail in the I-20 overlay district. We do have an application that has been submitted to rezone the property to commercial. Obviously, it still will be within the I-20 overlay district. That will be considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their June 25th meeting, and then will be forwarded to council for their July meeting for consideration of rezoning. Access to the subdivision is provided from the I-20 service road, as well as Mary Lou Drive, which is a 70-foot collector street, and then J.D. Tolles Drive will be extended through the subdivision on the northern part. J.D. Tolles Drive to the west is a 60-foot collector street, and it is recommended by staff that that be included in this subdivision, and the developer's engineer concurs with that. So the right-of-way will be adjusted to be a collector street within the subdivision. There will also be Gemma Drive, which cuts through the subdivision. Now, it will be a 50-foot street. It is a small street that will just take care of the 2 lots within that subdivision. The I-20 service road is accessed at 2 points by these 2 streets. Those are the approximate locations that were approved through a TxDOT review with a previous owner in a previous subdivision. We will have TxDOT reconfirm those locations to be sure that the spacing is correct, and approve that with the final plat. The subdivision will be served by both city water and sewer. The water service will be extended by the developer from Tolles Drive into the subdivision, and fire protection will be provided to the subdivision. There will also be a sanitary sewer service that will be extended within the subdivision to service it. There will be a detailed drainage study as required by the subdivision ordinance submitted with the final plat of the subdivision. There is an existing TxDOT drainage structure that goes under the interstate that is in place, and then there is an existing concrete culvert that will be removed from a previous development. As a part of this, that will be evaluated with the subdivision. Planning and Zoning Commission and staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat with the 60-foot right-of-way for J.D. Tolles within the subdivision, with the TxDOT approval on the spacing of the entrances or the street access, the drainage improvement plans for the property, and then the TxDOT, the fourth one actually will not apply because the existing structure is to be removed. So that is the recommendation of commission and staff. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the preliminary plat, and of course, you will receive the final plat also. And Mr. Stark is here representing the owner.
Any questions for Betty? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plat as read.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Betty. Item number 4, to consider an act on adopting a revised zoning map.
You have in your packet the revised zoning map, which was reviewed by commission. This is actually a replacement zoning map. The current map we have was adopted in 2015. It actually was prepared in January of 2014. It was not a map that was easy to update because it was not either GIS or CAD based. So we now have worked with our consulting engineers, Jacob and Martin. The current map you have incorporates all of the zoning changes from January of 14 through the present. This map will be easier to update, obviously, because each time an ordinance is adopted rezoning a piece of property, we will just transmit that to them the next day. They will update the map, and then we'll be able to easily put this on our website as well as update the current map that will be in there, in the office. Commission does recommend approval of the zoning map. I sent you via email kind of the highlights of the revised zoning map. There were 8 rather large areas. Primarily, they were zonings that were changed to planned developments during this time period that were not reflected on the current map. So those were just kind of highlights. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
How long did it take to revise the map?
I've been working on it for a few years. We had some ordinances that did not have, the rezoning ordinances did not actually have the field notes, or the field notes were not attached to the ordinance. So we had to go back, trace those back to the properties, and then incorporate that with the ordinances. So it took some time just going back and forth finding the actual field notes for the rezonings on some of those, because they were rather large tracts.
This brings everything up to date.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
When you say them, that when you send it off, like if there is a new update to, what do you mean by
Right.
that?
I will take the ordinance with the field notes. I can email it or text it to Jacob and Martin. They will incorporate that in the current map, send us back a new one via email, and then we do not have a large-scale plotter, so to do the larger maps, we will ask them to do those for us.
Now, how come the R5 and R3 zones over there at the racetrack property, those aren't shown on this map?
Okay, the property that is designated as PD.
So that doesn't ever change up, it doesn't ever show?
Actually, that is kind of unique. That one, that requirement for that, and I think we call it PD, just a minute, shops, it says shops, SCP. Part of the PD that was approved was the actual zoning or colored map that you've seen before, and that is the responsibility of the developer to keep that updated. When we did the rezoning for the event center and moved it further to the north and rezoned that event center property to R1, that is the responsibility of the developer, and they are working on doing that. We will actually have that as an attachment.
Okay.
And keep it in the file.
Because I could foresee
it
causing problems in the future.
That's the first time I will tell you, and I've done this for almost 40
all right.
years.
I mean, I'm just
But
curious.
it was a requirement of the PD. It's listed in the PD as it is their obligation to keep that updated, and I did notify them that we needed the updated map.
Okay.
On
So
that
they're going to send us
section.
that updated map, it's just a matter of following up with them to get that.
Yes. As soon as they're actually bringing us that, and they're bringing us the final plat for that part, that's 140 acres of the subdivision, and at that point in time, then we will have both of those.
Okay.
But I'm keeping in the file, in that PD file, the original map, and we are going to date each one of those. So there will be a way to track it.
Okay. Do we have a deadline on when they have to do this? That to us? Or-
I've asked them because it's coming up that we need to get the mayor to sign the plat and get it recorded within the time frame. So I think we'll have it this month.
Okay.
Yeah, Betty, what about the I-20 overlay?
The I-20 overlay, it's kind of hard to see on this. I really commend Jacob and Martin. We worked very hard. There were not exact field notes to the I-20 overlay in some places. It was like, you go along this street, but then it didn't connect. So this is the best that we know. Every place we had field notes we could trace back to, or streets we could get them to, we incorporated that. It is kind of hard to see on this, on the larger
Is it
map. It's
designated
those
in
dots.
It's the
It's dotted.
Okay.
It's the dotted areas. If you start out on the west end at Micus Road, you can kind of see how it does the jag and all, and you can kind of see the dotted area.
The I-20 overlay is mainly a materials requirement.
The I-20 overlay is mainly,
And
yes.
in the Texas legislature, in their infinite wisdom, passed a bill, and I forgot what the bill number is.
2934.
Yes.
Yes.
24,
And
39.
essentially,
Okay,
it's
24
going
and 39.
to decimate the I-20 overlay.
Yeah. It's on his desk still, isn't it?
I
Have it still.
Yes, he has until the 15th.
He has
I
until
believe.
Father's Day to sign.
He has till the 15th to either sign it,
Yeah.
or if he doesn't veto it, it goes into effect anyway. It is going to greatly affect the city's ability to have design standards in any zoning district. It will affect your masonry requirements, not just in the overlay, but in any of your
Citywide.
districts.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Betty? Thank you, Betty. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the revised zoning map.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Betty. Briefing of master park plan. Mr. Bernie.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is a brief update of where we, I guess, have come and where we are with the park master plan. And I'll just briefly run down a quick lineup of how this all started. Fall of 18, we had hired a consultant to conduct and do a park master plan, Pacheco & Co. In January this year, this council put together a steering committee to go over how we were going to approach developing a master plan with our consultant. And our steering committee consisted of our Mayor Pro Tem, Mrs. Leah Young, Councilmember Amy Fennell, our Planning and Zoning Commissioner, Mr. Billy Weichert, and our Parks Board Chairman, Mr. Larry Johnston, myself, and Eric Wilhite. So in the process of us meeting in the steering committee, and definitely would love to hear from you guys if you want to chime in on it, we went through a process of developing a questionnaire that we did mail out in February, and we also did an online survey, and out of that we received about 405 responses to that, both the mail out and also from the online surveys, which put into play some of the top 7 items that the city residents wanted to see as far as when it goes to park amenities and trails and what have you. And I'll be happy to share that with you here shortly. Matter of fact, I guess we can go right to it. Our top 7 was playground, walk, bike trails, nature areas, picnic tables and facilities, basketball courts, sand volleyball courts, and splash pads. Those are the top 7. And obviously, certain things are in play as far as financial grants and how we're going to fund that, and we can go into that if you like, but that's probably for another time, another conversation. Part of the master plan is obviously mapping the existing parks that we have, identifying some potential new ones, dependent upon how we want to proceed as open space, but that's what we're doing. Pacheco & Co. will have a write-up, similar to like a comp plan. Basically, this plan complements or supports our comp plan, but it gives you a park master plan. And part of it, or the main part of it, as far as it's a tool that we use or need for when we seek funding, either through Texas Parks and Wildlife or COG or what have you. And it also supports whenever we have development that comes in, the subdivisions and what have you, that we identify if we have a trail that goes through a potential large tract of land, then we can require them to dedicate that and support our subdivision ordinance. So we had on the 4th of June a town hall meeting with our stakeholders. And we had approximately 45 people attend, which I think was really good. And heard some input and some feedback. I think some of the things they talked about was regionalization, definitely playground, definitely a commitment to keep that playground equipment up, and possibly having a park staff to do that. So where we are today is we've taken all this information. Pacheco & Co. is putting together a plan, and what our target date is to come back to City Council in August to have a public hearing where we can present the plan to the council to approve it, and also to have additional input from our residents to, I guess you want to call it, adopt our park master plan. So that's a quick, fast, and explanation of it. And if you have any questions or comments or...
We got an email from Weatherford this past week, and they sent us, I think you got or Brian got a copy, I think, of their trail plan.
Yeah.
Of how, in the future, we may be able to tie into theirs. And Hudson Oaks also. So we're talking to them about, I think it'd be great if we had a regional type thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's part of our discussion in our committee. We were talking about regionalization, not only with Weatherford and Hudson Oaks, but also with Aledo and the Nettas, and to have that facility. It's a quality of life thing for our residents. And honestly, we're seeing more and more people, especially with our new residents, that's very important to them. And it's, something that I'm excited about.
Thanks, Bernie. Any other questions for Bernie?
Is there any particular new resident that would be excited about a potential Parkstrom?
I heard you were.
I see you got your splash pad on there. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, sir.
Item number 6, presentation, debt discussion with Hilltop Securities.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Marty Shu with Hilltop Securities. Also with me this evening is Carla Gonzalez with Hilltop. We represent the city as your financial advisor. We also have Kristen Salon with Norton Rose Fulbright. She represents the city as your bond attorney. There are 2 agenda items before you tonight, one of which is related to the adoption of an ordinance for tax notes. So prior to getting to that one, this is a great opportunity to just have a financial discussion or kind of go overview of the debt position of the city. So we put together this presentation to kind of give you just a rough or high-level overview of the current debt position. And to kickstart the discussion, it's important to kind of take a look at the historical and projected taxable assessed valuation for the city. So the taxable assessed valuation is important, of course, because it represents the appraisal of all of the property within the city that you can levy a tax against. Ultimately, that produces your property tax revenue, which is your largest revenue. It creates the capacity for you to operate and fund your projects. So this graph just kind of illustrates for you, as with most cities here in Texas, the city of Willow Park has experienced a lot of growth over the last few years. In the last 5 years, the city has seen a growth increase in assessed valuation of 48%. Over a 10-year period, 60%. All that growth is great. It means you have high demand for your area. But with that, of course, comes the need for infrastructure and providing services as well. And we're anticipating that you're going to continue to projected to continue to grow. So in gray, you can see where you think you're going to be in the next 5 years. As I mentioned, this value more or less sets your ability to, how you set your tax rate in connection with this value is ultimately what produces your revenue stream. So this is a look at where your tax rate has historically been. The property tax rate is actually comprised of 2 components, an M&O piece and an INS piece. The M&O stands for maintenance and operations. That's the nuts and bolts of what it takes to operate the city. That's the component that pays for that, what keeps the lights on here at City Hall. Whereas INS represents interest and sinking. That's the component of the the component of your tax rate that is used to service your debt. So this just kind of shows you historically over time, as you would expect it, your M&O component of your total property tax rate has been a little bit larger. For the last 3 years, the city has maintained a total tax rate of .5367. That's basically 53 cents for every $100 of assessed value. To give you an idea, we're often asked questions about where that is and with relation to maximums and capacity limits. Just by way of reference, in the state of Texas, you have a maximum tax rate of $1.50. So as you can see, at 53 cents, you are well below any legal limits for your debt. Now, of course, there are always practical applications for limits. I suspect if you increased your tax rate to $1.50 tomorrow, you might have a bunch of citizens who are coming after you. But that being said, cities often get a bad rap here in Texas because for all of the services you provide, you actually have relatively low tax rates. It's really the school systems. Hopefully there's no school officials here to hear me say this, but it's usually the schools that are taxing at the maximum rates, which ultimately produce the highest impact to your actual property tax payers. This is a look at where your outstanding debt is today. So the city currently has, existing right now, just over $21 million of debt outstanding. Now within that debt, you're not actually levying a tax to pay for all of it. There is a component of that debt that is being paid by water and sewer revenues. This is by which we would call it self-supporting debt. So you're making transfers of water and sewer revenues to support a portion of that debt. So just almost $6 million of that debt outstanding is being paid by water and sewer revenues. So if you move all the way to the far columns, J, K, and L, that's the portion of the debt that is being paid by your property tax. So the INS component of that tax rate is being levied to support those payments, and that's what it looks like annually over the next 30 years. Ultimately, as you pay down debt, you have a capacity to layer in additional debt, and you have dips. So we take all of these variables and we look at them with respect to tax rate impact analyses. So if we take your assessed valuation and we look at where you're projected to grow, we start with where you are today. We know your 2020 value. We're relatively close to getting your final value. So it looks like you're going to be just probably at about 9% of growth. But thereafter, we try to be conservative with growth projections, especially as it's related to your debt planning. So for the next 2 years, we're anticipating a 3% growth. 2 years after that, 2%, and thereafter 1.5%. Again, conservative usually in our estimation is best for tax rate planning purposes. And then when we layer in the existing debt that is being levied for the property tax, it creates that last column, which is where we calculate what your tax is. This existing debt that we have illustrated for you right now does include the tax notes that we're going to be discussing. The next page I have is a little bit more of a detailed worksheet on the impact of layering in these tax notes that are before you tonight.
Marty, I want to just back up for one quick second, just
Sure.
so council can understand. So what she's talking about on value is in 1 year you had a 5.56% growth, and over a 5-year period you had almost a 50% growth, and a 10-year period you had 60% growth. If you look at that column in the red where it says assumed growth, the higher that number is, the lower your rate will actually be. So when we ran these projections, we gave you a what I would call a worst case scenario. I don't think, Candy, you've been here longer than anybody else. Have we ever had a 1.5% growth year over year? I mean, you're going to be going back a long ways. You're typically going to get 3 to 5% every year in growth, even in a bad economy and a bad year. And so when you see these numbers, just know that this is almost a doomsday type of scenario.
Right. As your financial advisor, we would rather see you be doomsday overly conservative than
Yes.
be overly
Yes.
optimistic with your projections, which would understate your tax impact. And that never usually is the best way to look at things. So exactly to that point, this is just another form of that spreadsheet in a little bit of a different way where we've taken your assessed value, column B, the growth, same, your existing debt, you can see where that tax rate calculation is based on what we know today. When we layer in the anticipated tax notes, so my partner Carla is going to give you more details about that sale for the next agenda item, but this is the actual repayment schedule that's anticipated for that tax note, or at least that's for your approval tonight. As we layer that in, we get to a total aggregate debt, new debt payment per year, which creates a tax rate of 0.2716. That's just for your interest and sinking component. So it is just a little over a 4-cent impact to your INS rate. And to give you an idea of what that translates to in actual dollars, we created a table for you. So you can see that 4 cents for the average property owner who has a home of about $200,000, that 4-cent tax impact translates to $80 of additional taxes on an annual basis. If you break that down monthly, that's about $6.67 per month to a home value of $200,000. We've also given you the figures for $100,000 and $300,000 as well, just to kind of see from a dollar figure. So while there is an impact on this, it also creates additional capacity. So the top 2 lines there to give you an idea or a benchmark for every 5-cent property tax increase that you're willing to take on, you can generate the capacity to receive $6 million in proceeds of debt for additional projects. And that doubles. So again, for every 5 cents, so for 10 cents, you could generate $12 million for available projects. That's capacity.
A quick question.
Sure.
So if we were to maintain our current tax rate, we would have to reduce the M&O to account for the increase in INS.
That's exactly correct. Yes. So all of this more or less focuses on the tax supported debt, but as I mentioned previously, you do have a component of your debt that is being supported by water and sewer revenue, and so there is that side of it where you are levying your water and sewer rates in accordance to pay for that, and as well as your operations of the system. You do have a couple anticipated debt issues in the hopper. It's my understanding that you're familiar with some of these pro formas that we've already shown you, that there are 2 issues right now that you are planning to issue through the Texas Water Development Board, which is an excellent financing vehicle. They provide subsidized rates, so kudos to the city for taking advantage and utilizing those programs. This is more or less just a recap of that pro forma. Ultimately, when we take your existing debt that's being paid by your revenues and then we layer in the new debt, it produces your total aggregate debt liability, and your revenues will be set and target such to maintain a 1.1 times coverage for the debt. So we ultimately have a little bit of coverage there over the payments. I can't leave a debt discussion without mentioning the ratings, the credit ratings of the city. So the credit rating of the city is much like you or our own personal credit rating. The higher your personal credit rating is, when you go to buy a car or a house, you get a lower interest rate. Well, the same holds true for the city. The higher your credit rating, the lower your cost of borrowing is when you issue debt. Right now, the city is currently rated by Standard & Poor's at the AA level. So as you can see in the very far column, we've got it highlighted. I think it's important to note that there are only 2 rating categories that are higher than where you're at right now. And how do they base their rating criteria? Well, sometimes it's a little cryptic, but this is their best way of trying to publish how they actually look at the city. Ultimately, the credit rating reflects the likelihood or the perceived likelihood of your ability to default on the debt. So the higher your rating, that likely means that you're not going to default. Based on these categories of how they measure you, one of the things I always like to point out, or I find the most interesting, is that the category that has the highest weighting at 30% is the economy. And a lot of that is centered on socioeconomic statistics that are somewhat beyond your control, kind of in the greater scheme of things. So I find that very interesting. But I particularly like this slide because I think it gives you some nice data by which you can feel very proud about your rating. So as I mentioned, there's only 2 categories of rating higher than where you're at right now. But if you look at the numbers, Standard & Poor's is in the center for where they are in relation to the different cities that they rate. You are in the top 38% of the ratings for cities that they rate in the state of Texas. So there are only 97 cities that are higher than you, which is 18%. So again, you should be very proud of your position. And then, of course, they publish full rating reports which highlight the strong management and budget flexibility and everything on the city. And lastly, it's really hard to compare yourself. It's very hard to have an apples-to-apples comparison, but we just put out some statistics because it's always fun to just kind of see where you are in relation to some of your peer comparisons. So this is just more or less to give you an idea on some different benchmarks as it relates to debt and tax rates and population and everything on some of your peers. So that, again, high-level overview. We're going to drill down into some specifics on your tax note sale, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have before we go into the tax notes.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner.
We need to close that agenda item out and go to the next one. That was just a presentation. There's no action to be taken.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Yeah, you can do that.
Item number 7, to consider an act to finance the cost of paying contractual obligations to be incurred for acquiring, constructing, improving, and maintaining streets, thoroughfares, bridges, alleyways, and sidewalks within the city, including related storm drainage improvements, traffic signalization, and signage, streetscaping, and medium improvements, utility relocations, and the acquisition of land and rights of way, therefore acquiring playground equipment for the city's Parks and Recreation Department, and to pay professional service rendered in relation to such projects and the financing thereof.
Good evening, my name is Carla Gonzalez. I'm also with Hilltop Securities, and I'm here to present to you the sale results of the tax note series 2019. And I'm not sure if you have a copy of this presentation. Oh, there it is. So I'll pass it on. The tax notes were sold through a private placement, which means that multiple banks were invited to participate by submitting interest rate bids, and this took place last Tuesday, June 4th. A private placement is a very cost-effective method of sale because there is no cost of preparing an offering document. There's no need to obtain a rating, a bond rating, which means no rating agency fees. And there's also no need for an underwriter, which saves in underwriting cost. This page of the tax note sale just shows you a summary of the financing. The city will obtain $2.3 million in project funds from the note. And this page actually shows you the participation from the banks that submitted their bids last Tuesday. As you can see, the note was very well accepted, and we received 6 different banks that submitted their bids. And actually, we received a 7th one, which is Chase Bank's one that you can see on here. That this bid we had to remove or eliminate because the bank could not adapt to the term sheet that we had sent out. They could not hold the rate that they submitted until today, and they wanted to adjust this rate yesterday, and so that wouldn't be fair to the other banks. And since they couldn't commit to the rating, we had to go to with the next best bidder, which was First National Bank. And as you can see, they came in at 2.15% with a non-callable feature, which means that the note cannot be paid in advance to the 7-year term of it, but given the really low interest rate and the short length of the note, it is really not anticipated that the note will be paid in advance of the maturity of it. So it is it's good in this case to take advantage of the lower interest rate, even if you don't have that call option. And this final page shows you what the 2.15% interest rate means in terms of interest payment amount for the 7-year term of the note. And as Marty mentioned, the tax impact of the note is about 4 cents increase on the INS tax rate. This is the same amortization that Marty had presented on page 8 of her presentation, so this fits into that. By adopting the ordinance tonight, you will be given a final authorization to approve the notes, and you'll be awarding the note to First National Bank at a 2.15% interest rate, and the city will receive the funds from the note on July the 10th. Do you have any questions regarding the tax note?
So what's the total interest over 7 years?
The total interest over 7 years is actually on this page, which I can see. And that is $2,609,830.
So,
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, that's not.
$244,000.
$244,000.
Car loan, or title loan.
So the only other question I noticed when I was reviewing this earlier is in 2026, you show a $810,000 principal payment.
Yes, so we go back, I don't know if we can go back to the prior presentation, but on Marty's presentation, you can see that on that page 8, you can see that we actually structure the notes in order, yeah, there you go, okay. Sorry. So we structure the notes to maintain a 27-cent throughout the life of the note, which is 7 years. So therefore, because we had more capacity on the year 2026, we had more, there was less existing debt, and we were able to put more debt in that year.
So this note will be paid off in 7 years.
Yes, the final payment will be February 15th, 2026. The first payment starts on February 15, 2020.
Again, this note is not just for road and street improvements, it's also for parks, and also for some drainage in the city as well.
Why didn't we do them in separate notes?
We have issuance costs. Every time we go out on tax notes, it's going to cost you around $65,000 to do it. When we got the interest rate, we just felt as a staff that it'd be good to go ahead and do it now if you're going to do it eventually. I don't know if you'll see 2.15% on a short-term note. We have funds in reserve to answer the inevitable question that's probably going to come up. We do have funds in reserve, but we are currently earning 2.4% on our TechStar fund, and so we're earning 2.4 and we're getting a loan at 2.15. And so it would cost us more money to take out of our TechStar fund than it would to issue debt.
Any other questions?
So as far as the ordinance is concerned, this does not imply we're raising our INS rate. Or we're not voting on raising our INS rate.
No. What you're doing is you're saying you're going to issue $2.365 million in debt.
Right.
The interest and sinking rate will be determined by what our obligations are going to be as of October 1 of 2019.
Right.
We are in the process, and I'll just tell you, we're having discussions with our financial team to actually pay off some of the other debts earlier, like in August or September of this fiscal year.
So right now, we don't see any impact to our overall tax rate.
I don't want to sit there and promise you in June that we won't see an increase or a decrease in the tax rate. I will say you've kept the same tax rate for 3 years, relatively the same. We don't know what your values are going to do, but we think they're going to be around $565 million. That in of itself is going to require your tax rate to go down on maintenance and operation. Your effective rate will most likely be lower than your right now your M&O is at 30.3084.
Yeah.
So your effective rate, and this is just me back of the napkin, I'm assuming your effective rate's going to come in around 26 cents, something like that. So that's going to come off of 4 cents. Now, depending on what you want to do from a budget standpoint, do you want to?
Right, that'll come
Yeah.
during the
Yeah.
budget discussions.
Yes.
But-
And that's why I don't want to sit here in June and say, hey, we're going to keep the same rate.
Right.
Because we have some budget discussions that we've got to,
Sure, there's a lot of other things on the
Yes.
plate, but I just wanted to point out to everybody listening that this ordinance by no means increases the tax rate.
no, there's no. Well, you are saying you're going to issue the debt.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to say it's not going to. Last year, I was very confident in saying your tax rate would not go up.
Right.
I'm not that confident this year.
Right.
But I don't think this has anything to do with the other.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
First, we need to read the caption of the ordinance first.
I'll make a motion to move to adopt the ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Willow Park, Texas, tax notes, Series 2019. And it's
The ordinance, the caption.
An ordinance authorizing the issuance of the City of Willow Park, Texas, tax note series 2019, specifying the terms and features of said note, levying a continuing direct annual ad valorem tax for the payment of said note, and resolving other matters incident and related to the issuance, sale, payment, and delivery of said note, including the approval and execution of paying agent registrar agreement and a note purchase agreement, and providing an effective date.
Second.
We have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Item number 8, to consider and act on a awarding bid on Ranch House Road from Fox Hunt Trail to Scenic Trail. Mr. Derrick.
Thank you. So I think we talked through this last time, and we took bids for the reconstruction of of Ranch House from Fox Hunt down to Scenic Trail with concrete paving. We had 6 bids. Jackson Construction was the low bid at just over $1.15 million. Our budget, that was right at the budget that we had estimated for the project. We got good recommendations. This is the same contractor that's doing the work on Crown Point Boulevard and Tolles Road and those extensions over there. So, but we had good recommendations from other entities for which they're doing work. So, our recommendation is to award that bid to Jackson for the base bid of $1.15 million.
Are they the ones that have the equipment set up over by the shops?
Yes.
Have they done any work in town before?
They did, I think they did the original part of Crown Point Boulevard, when that was the original concrete paving that was put in.
Did they do the approach at Rental 1?
I'm not aware.
Or private? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think that is, yeah, I believe they did, yes.
Any questions for Derrick?
Well, we have communication issues with the way we deal with quality. We're going to put in the contract something saying that they have to let us know when they're shutting off streets and make sure their flagmen available.
We did, the contract, when you bid the project, the contract is put out at that time as far as what it's going to consist of, but we did include additional language to try to help mitigate that on this one.
Yeah, because it was in quality, it was in the contract with quality. What kind of language did you add this go around to make sure that they did it? Fines or anything?
I'm sorry, say again?
There were fines or anything like that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, in the contract you're referring to, there were monetary penalties for not following procedure. We just kind of beefed up the language to make sure that that was clear, for one thing, and secondly, that we put a little more meat into it as far as the timing of those being implemented and the ability to do that, so.
If we don't have flagmen on site, when there's supposed to be flagmen on site, what do we do? We're going to be able to go after them, or who goes after them, or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, we will, we have the ability to stop work and assess penalties for that, number one. And we can also, we can bring traffic control out and then back charge it to the contractor.
Okay.
And in a safety situation, that might be the better alternative if that came up.
That's
But
fine.
I think, having been through that with that contractor, there's no reason to think that one contractor is going to have the same issues, but having gone through that, I think the biggest thing is we'll spend a little more time up front and as the process goes on, making sure that they understand that that's a high priority. We did do a lot, we actually specified in this contract a lot more signage than what they had in the last one. We always specify typical signage, but we give them a little bit of latitude to determine how that's going to be done, but we specifically, I did a traffic control layout and specifically laid out requirements that they have to comply with on this one. So there's a certain minimum number of items that they have to have on the project, whereas last time they had to have specific things, but there was no minimum or maximum requirement on it, but this time there will be. So before they can even begin work on any specific segment, they'll have to have that in place before we release them to do that work.
Okay. We got a lot more feeder street than this scope than we did.
I'd say on this one, what we do have on this one that we didn't on the other is a lot more ability to reroute. That was one thing that hurt us on the other one is, aside from their lack of desire to comply with that, they had a lot less leeway as far as where traffic went, so we should have a lot better control over that on this one.
Any other questions for Derek?
Derek, when's, if approved, what's the expectation for start and finish?
I haven't talked to them about that. I wasn't sure what the timing of the financing would be, but I believe they're pretty anxious to get started, so I would expect it's usually about a 2-week turnaround to execute contracts and figure another couple of weeks after that, so I would say probably early, mid-July would be reasonable to assume.
And what do you expect the length of time to be?
On the construction? I think we're looking at about 9 months, I believe is what we were thinking.
Depending on weather.
Right.
We're hitting the best time of year to be doing it, so.
Kristen, logistically, when we sell the note, will we actually do this? We'll contact the bank tomorrow to agree to the rate.
They've already agreed to
They've already agreed to the rate.
Right.
So logistically, walk us through the sale, because it's not like we're getting the money tomorrow.
Right, so the closing is July the 10th. So what we do on the city's behalf is submit a transcript of the proceedings to the Texas Attorney General's office. We need their approval of the note before we can proceed to close. So since this is a private placement, we just work with the bank. They didn't have any conditions in their bid, which is great. So we just, it's pretty smooth direction toward closing. So it should be pretty straightforward. And then on July 10th, they transfer the funds they received the note in exchange. That's your construction.
Thank you.
I have one last question that's not related to awarding the bid, but before we did the other stretch of Ranch House, we did a meeting
Town
with
hall.
citizens. Yeah, do we plan, potentially knowing we don't know the start date, to have something?
Yeah, I think after we issue the notice to proceed, there will be some lag time, and I think it would be appropriate to set up a town hall, limited strictly to traffic patterns.
Right.
The last one seemed to kind of spin out of control a little bit. So we'll limit traffic patterns. Everybody's welcome to attend. That'll be,
After the pre-construction, we'll have a schedule in hand, so that would probably be the best time to do that.
I think by the time we go to them with a plan, we need to have the
Right.
plan
Right.
established.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
What options
sorry.
are the options, is the soil treatment option included in that?
We had an alternate for that, but the cores that we took on this one, from that stretch down this way, we've got over 10 inches of base in most places, so it really wouldn't call for that. You get pretty much the same or better pavement structure out of what you've got versus a lower level of, or lower thickness of base with the stabilization. So we did not include that.
Do we know how many times Ranch House from this particular part has been redone?
I'm only aware that it was seal coated about 6 years ago, maybe 7, something like that. Prior to that, I don't have any idea. But, well, I do know on the cores that we found, there were, throughout the entire stretch, there were at least 2 layers of asphalt that were, it was paved at one time and then covered and paved over again. So, but like I said, I mean, with those different layers of pavement that have been done in the past, most places have 12 inches or better of base material, which is pretty significant. The lowest we had was 10 inches. So, and stabilizing good base material really doesn't gain you much, so it just wasn't deemed necessary.
Okay.
So you're recommending just the base bid, not the 2 alternates?
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to award the bid for Ranch House Road construction from Fox Hunt Trail to Scenic Trail, to the low bidder. What's the?
Jackson Construction.
Jackson Construction.
Jackson Construction.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 9, to consider and act toward water line replacement contract on Chuckwagon Trail. Derek.
So this project was, the main focus of the project was to loop a line on Chuckwagon between Squaw Creek and Pitchfork. There's currently a line that ends at Pitchfork and Chuckwagon that dead ends at that location. There's a main line that runs down Squaw Creek. And so there's a lot of flushing involved. The guys have had to do a considerable amount of flushing to keep the residuals up in that line. So requested that we look at looping that line in. And so that's what you've got 2 bid schedules with this. Bid Schedule A is for that purpose. The other bid Schedule B was to extend a line for the new well, one of the 3 new wells that's going in. The well that we originally looked at putting at the City Hall site, the results we were getting for the nearby well at Fox Hunt was not great, so we looked at doing it at the Well 11 site. So this would include funds to extend water lines from that location, to get it into to get the water from the well into the system. So.
This was, Gary, this was the project that you asked for.
The only question I have, so we budgeted 100,000, right? So where's the remaining?
So it's broken up into 2 components. One is going to be Chuckwagon. That'll come out of budget funds that we've already budgeted. The other will be paid for out of the $1.5 million. It's going to be part of our well replacement program.
Okay.
That was anticipated to be in that pool of money. So.
Now, is our equipment going to break down? Chuckwagon and Pitchfork are both a mess. And so whenever we go through with to do the water line, and we're not going to mess up the roads anymore, but they're already messed up.
Well, I don't anticipate them messing up the road, other than they're going to have to bore across Stagecoach to get on the other side of to get on the side of Chuckwagon. But there's no guarantee. But the contract includes provisions for them to make repairs. So if they disturb any asphalt or anything like that, they have to cut it out and replace it. So-
Raymond, do we have any of that water line under the street, or is it most of it in the right of way?
We're on, there's no water line on Chuck Wagon.
Yeah, so,
We'll
yeah,
have to-
yeah, you're right.
We're gonna have to cut, stagecoach down.
Yeah.
It's right on the edge, for them to tap it.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I jumped the gun.
And they'll repair that back to the condition that it was in. So we had 6 bids on that project as well. So if you include both bid schedules, A&M Construction was the low bidder with the total bid for both of $174,327. We didn't find any issues with the references for that contractor either, and our recommendation is to award both bid Schedule A and bid Schedule B to A&M Construction.
Any other questions for Derek?
He knows what I think.
Yep.
We'll talk about it later.
Do we have a motion?
I move to award the contract for water line replacement and groundwater supply line to A&M Construction.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 10, to consider and act on a dangerous substandard building ordinance.
So this is a tool that we're going to ask y'all to provide us with for substandard housing, substandard structures. In the event that we have some housing that is dilapidated, unfinished, incomplete, this would give the city the authority to come in through a building and standards board to take corrective measures on those properties, up to and including condemnation and demolition. Currently, we do not have the ability to do that.
This remedy Meadows Place?
It would remedy any
Substandard.
it would remedy any substandard structure.
New blight, old blight. It'll get rid of. How quick-
Any substandard structure.
How quickly can we assemble a board?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but right now the council would serve as that board until, no, we didn't put that in
No,
ordinance.
we need to put that on the next
On the July
meeting to
agenda.
appoint.
So we can-
It's a
Appoint that
5-member
board.
board with 4 alternates.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't put that in the ordinance.
We put that app out, we put an app out on the website, I guess, for that new board, or are we going to appoint the board? The council is the board. What are we doing here?
Well, no, I would not appoint the council as board.
Yeah.
This is a building standards board that you will appoint. And,
Okay.
you could serve as a board for this, but I didn't set it up that way. And I would not recommend it that way.
No, I don't want to be.
So,
We can take applications similar to the TERS or the P&Z. We can put that out. I can have that up by tomorrow afternoon on the website and take applications. It's a 5-member board. We can maybe have one appointed by the July meeting.
Okay. And what's the procedure? I mean, you find a house, it's falling down.
or we'll have a code officer who'll write a notice of violation. Basically, they'll respond within 15 days, then set a hearing in front of the board. The board will then order repair or demolition, depending on the condition of the structure. If it's public nuisance level, then it's demolish it. And so if they don't demolish it after the public hearing, the time frame, then that will be a final order to abate, and that will be, if they don't appeal that to district court, then we can take down the structure.
So the notices and whatnot that we have basically on backlog, because we can't get any, we don't have this current measure in place to take care of it ourselves. Will those fast track, I'm guessing, because we have some already, I'm thinking.
I think the question is there a grandfather clause
Yeah,
For the condition of the buildings?
for the current ones?
for the current ones.
No.
Is it just-
Okay.
No, If they don't meet the conditions, it's a continuing
If
obligation.
there's a structure in a residential development that is unfinished and hasn't been worked on in 18 months,
Yeah.
That's not a bill, if it's a technical building code requirement that and basically what we said is, if you don't meet our building, adopt a building. So we didn't really adopt any new quote-unquote standards. It's just the standards of maintenance and structure. So it will apply as soon as we enact it. They'll have to comply with the conditions of the minimum standards we've established in here. And if you look at them, they're pretty egregious type standards. So we're talking about structures that are, and we already have building codes in place and maintenance codes to deal with just technical issues that you hadn't met. We're talking about substandard dangerous structures here that we probably need to push either to fix them or take them down. So that's what this will give us, that tool. We still can go to municipal court to seek fines. It's the first step if we want to do it. Do it simultaneously with this building standards board. We can also file suit in district court, but this is the most, it's an administrative process. You have the board. The board can act as a quasi-judicial board, so you're essentially making a ruling. If they don't appeal it in 30 days, it's fine. And so you can take action at that point in time to take the structure down. So this is the most cost-effective way. Otherwise, if you have to file suit, obviously it costs a lot of money, legal fees, filing fees. So this will be the most, the quickest, most efficient process we can have to deal with substandard structures.
So on the code enforcement part of it, do we have a code enforcement official?
We currently have a vacancy, but I believe that we can do contract with BV, who does most of our other, I believe that's a service that they offer. And quite frankly, that's probably a discussion that we need to have moving forward, is to contract out that work.
Just for the building code part, to contract that out?
Add that to BV's responsibilities.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve ordinance number 794-19, an ordinance of the City of Willow Park, Texas, amending Chapter 3, Building Regulations of the City of Willow Park's Code of Ordinances by adding an Article 3.09, Dangerous Buildings, creating and authorizing a Building and Standards Board, providing a penalty for violations of this ordinance, an amount not to exceed $2,000, providing a cumulative repealer clause, providing for a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Do we have a second?
One quick question.
Question.
This applies to both commercial and residential?
Correct.
Yes.
Any structure.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. We need a motion to table item number 11, please.
I move that we table item number 11.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Item number 12, to consider and act on resolution 2019-04, a resolution approving a Chapter 380 program.
So, a Chapter 380 program is, it's fairly common, and it's becoming more common with municipalities, especially those that do not have a 4A or a 4B economic development component, which we do not. Essentially what it does, again, I hate to use the old cliche, it's another tool in the toolbox that we can use for economic development or we can use for other purposes. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, it's generally written. We can use it for incentivizing various businesses to relocate to Willow Park. We can use it for incentivizing
Moving infrastructure, anything.
Yeah,
Basically, it gives you any tool that you want to use to try to promote economic development. So it's the broadest possible program you can have as a city, other than having adopted a type A or type B tax, which we do not have. So this is, I suggested we adopt one because it gives us a lot of flexibility when we deal with businesses that come to town. You don't have to give them incentives, but what you can do is you can provide them services. We do it a lot in Brownwood. We have a lot of Chapter 3 agreements. You can do things like sales tax rebate agreements. You name whatever you want to do. It's up to you. But this This adopting a resolution just gives you the ability to do it in the future, if you so desire. Doesn't commit you to doing anything. Just gives you flexibility.
And any agreements have to be approved by council.
Yes. We've been asked by a couple of businesses that may have gone elsewhere about
Not Amazon, right?
You know, we took the Amazon meeting. Bernie said he just wasn't a big Amazon guy.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Who have you been talking to? That's out of curiosity. I mean, I don't know, you said there's a couple of businesses,
We've been talking to some restaurants.
restaurants,
We've been talking to some hotels.
hotels and restaurants. Okay.
I make a motion that we approve resolution number 2019-04, a resolution adopting economic development program pursuant to Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 380.
And I'll second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 13, to consider and act on ordinance 793-19, an ordinance establishing a second regular monthly meeting date for the Willow Park City Council.
So this is something Mayor Moss wanted staff to look into. Rather than trying to have a scheduled special called meeting later on in the month, as we sometimes do, if we had a standing second regular meeting, it would not require a supermajority for a quorum, which sometimes can be problematic. We do not have to have or actually hold a second meeting, but we need to have one on the books. To give you an example, Hudson Oaks actually has 2 meetings every month. They just don't have their first one. It always gets canceled, and then they have their second one. And in fact, I can speak for staff, if y'all want to consider taking the Hudson Oaks model. They don't meet in June, and they don't meet in December.
That's for another day.
But
it would be the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Yes. And that would require some shuffling with P&Z, obviously. But Mr. Chu has gave me every assurance that P&Z will maneuver. She's from Stephenville. I have great confidence in her maneuvering abilities.
Any other questions for Brian? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 793-19, an ordinance amending section 1.03.031 of the City of Willow Park Code of Ordinances to provide for a second regular meeting of the City Council to be held on the 4th Tuesday of each month, providing a cumulative repealer clause, providing for severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 14, to consider an act on canceling the City Council's second regular monthly meeting for the month of June. Do we have a motion?
I move we cancel the second meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have that on most of your, after each first meeting of the month, so you get to make that decision.
But we can make the decision still to hold the second one as a working group.
Sure.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Mayor and council comments. I'd like to personally thank the council for their service. I'd like to thank Mr. Grimes and his staff for their work, and also to council to be mindful of contacting our city manager with any citizens' concerns, with any city issues and our personnel. Mr. Grimes.
Just a couple of quick things. We've got quite a few people out and about this month. That's kind of why we're not having the second meeting in June. I know Bernie's going to be on vacation later on in the month. I'm going to be gone next week. In case anybody was wondering, Saturday at 1 o'clock, I'll be in Omaha, Nebraska, watching Texas Tech beat the crap out of Michigan. And not missing the University of Texas there is going to be great, too.
Pushing it.
And TCU didn't get a ticket either.
Pushing it. Mr. Browns, proceed.
We'll be in and out, but we will be covering, me and Bernie have kind of overlapped our vacations. I think Candy just got back, but Alicia's about to leave, so June's the month of vacations. Get ready for July. We're going to start hitting budget pretty hard and heavy. We're having a department head meeting tomorrow morning to discuss budgets. If anybody has problems sleeping, you can feel free to attend. I'm being about to be gavelled off, so that's it.
I have a comment. So in the budget discussions, what I'd like to do is, would like to see is from the department heads, some planning. You know, we've got 4 roads we're scheduled for this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see what's coming for next year, same for water lines, you know, and improvements that we can budget for and have a plan to go by.
Yes.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Ms. Hannah, let's go home.
You know, if you want such a good read.